An attack on an Israeli military convoy this morning. An anti-tank missile fired. Casualties in the wake along a disputed area between Israel and Lebanon. The attack perpetrated reportedly by Hezbollah. With Miranda Khan, J.D. Hayworth welcoming you in on a very busy morning here on America's Forum.
Yeah, J.D., in response, Israel fired dozens of shells into Lebanon and called an emergency Security Council meeting to assess and address that situation.
With this recent string of attacks, concerns are mounting. This could be the beginning of a much broader confrontation. For more on this developing story, let's bring in Danny Ayalon, the former Israeli deputy foreign minister and the former ambassador from Israel here to the United States. Ambassador Ayalon, thank you for joining us at Newsmax New York. Before we get, it's so good to have you, although this morning has already proven trying in the Middle East. We have a lot to get to, and we want to get to that prisoner swap involving Jordan and ISIS. But let's talk about the attack this morning on the convoy. Hezbollah is claiming credit. As you know, Iran supports Hezbollah. Is it too early to connect the dots here?
No, we know for a fact that Hezbollah is an integral organ of the terror machinery and infrastructure of Iran. And whatever Hezbollah does is by order of Tehran, which would like to actually put a smokescreen on the negotiations, so the nuclear negotiations, so they can toughen their position over there. And also, they would like to open a second front for us, Hamas from Gaza, which is also supported by Iran, and Hezbollah from the north.
What is this, this particular attack, what does this signify for the future?
Well, Miranda, I think we are in a slippery slope now. I would say that the more we see Syria disintegrating, the more we see more sub-national groups taking over, then there is no address, there is no responsibility. And these jihadist, radical Islamist terrorists are taking over. And when they're taking over, they are attacking wherever they can.
Danny, Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke at a Holocaust remembrance ceremony yesterday and reiterated Israel's position on the threat of a nuclear Iran. Let's listen to that.
The Ayatollahs in Iran, they deny the Holocaust while planning another genocide against our people. Let me be clear. The Jewish people will defend itself by itself against any threat. That's what the Jewish state is all about.
The Prime Minister spells it out, Mr. Ambassador. Does that include Israel reserving the right to strike first against Iran, even if America should sit on the sidelines?
Well, absolutely. I think the Prime Minister was right to say that never again, especially as we mark the 70th year of the liberation of the Auschwitz concentration camp. 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust simply because they were Jews and they were defenseless. So no more. And we know that Iran is actually planning to take over not just the Middle East, but far beyond. This is why they have now these long-range ballistic missiles that can also reach here, North America. So Iran is a clear and present danger, not just for Israel, but for the entire international community. So the more they act, the more they demand compliance from Iran is better. You cannot really negotiate with these terrorists. They only understand when you have the upper hand. And today the international community has the upper hand with oil prices sliding. Iran is very vulnerable economically, socially. So this is the time not to face or save face, which they should not. They are the ones breaching materially all their agreements. This is the time to put the foot down. We do have the power to do it. We won't have to resort to any military means because we can achieve it diplomatically if we make the right moves.
So, Danny, real quickly, we only have a few seconds remaining. You were talking about we cannot negotiate with terrorists. Your thoughts real quickly on the hostages being held by ISIS. As we mentioned, reports say Jordan will release the woman ISIS once. So is this a dangerous
Tell you what,
slope?
if I might interject here, given the ramifications of that story, why don't we do this? Our format commands that we take a little bit of time here. Danny Ayalon, we appreciate your time. Thank you for your willingness to stay with us following the break. When we come back, we'll talk about the prisoner swap that's being reported. Jordan trying to get one of its pilots back, releasing a convicted terrorist incarcerated in that nation. Israel has had its share of prison swaps too. We'll talk about that with Danny Ayalon as America's Forum continues. Let's continue our conversation with Danny Ayalon, the former Israeli Deputy Foreign Minister and the former Israeli Ambassador to the U.S., currently a visiting professor at Yeshiva University, back with us from Newsmax New York. And Miranda, pick it up where we had to leave off before the break.
I'm sorry, that was a very detailed question to ask you with only seconds remaining. Thanks for staying with us, Danny. So we were mentioning earlier that Jordan is now caving into the demands made by ISIS. Officials say that they're willing to trade a convicted terrorist in exchange for a military pilot. So is this dangerous territory? I mean, if everyone starts giving in to ISIS demands?
Yes, Miranda, it's very dangerous and there are no good solutions. You know, this is a most excruciating dilemma for any leader in office, is what to do when you have live prisoners, whether it's prisoners of wars or hijacked people, and the terrorists demand release of terrorists. What do you do? In our case, we did release some prisoners, actually 1,000 prisoners, for the release of one soldier, Gilad Shalit, 3 years ago from Hamas in Gaza. Later to find out that some of these released terrorists were the ones responsible for the kidnapping and killing of the 3 schoolboys, high school boys, last summer. So really there is no good decision here. It's almost a lose-lose situation. The problem is that once you negotiate with terrorists, even if you do it through a third party, it gives them recognition, it gives them some legitimacy, but the most important thing is it gives them the incentive to hijack more for more ransom and for more release for their own prisoners. So this is something that you have to be very tough and sometimes just bite the bullet.
Well, it certainly remains a topic for discussion. Great controversy on the release you mentioned for the IDF, the young soldier 3 years ago, part of the political process. A campaign underway in Israel now. Prime Minister Netanyahu wants to keep his job. There are those who want to unseat him, and reportedly there are Obama advisors advising the Israeli opposition. What is your take on that, and how involved has America been traditionally in Israeli elections?
Well, I think the administration would be well advised not to meddle in Israeli internal politics. I think that would be also the case for Israeli government when it comes to Washington. But I would say in our case, the relationship, the alliance is so strong and natural, almost too close to comfort. So with this intimacy, I guess sometimes there is crossing the lines politically. But if this is true, JD, I think this is something which is very wrong, and a clarification should come out. I don't think that President Obama should send his political advisors to help any of the parties in Israel, but I'm not sure it will help. It could backfire, and if this is the case, Israelis may resent any intervention from abroad, and in defiance to that, they may even go back. Some people who decided not to vote for Bibi Netanyahu may now rethink that position and vote for him, just as a defiance to this foreign interference.
Danny, we're talking about judgment calls, and Obama administration officials said Mr. Netanyahu would, quote, pay a price for snubbing the White House and accepting Speaker John Boehner's invitation to speak in front of Congress. Is that a price, like an overt attempt to make him lose the election?
Well, first of all, it seems like they, whoever leaked that notion that Bibi would pay a price, it seems like they didn't take too long to do that. If this is the case that they sent their political advisors to help his rivals. Whether he will pay a price or not, I'm not sure, because as I mentioned before, Miranda, the Israelis would resent the fact that anyone is trying to meddle from outside. So the question is, as we go, and it's still a long time to go. We have almost 2 months, which is a long time in our region. The question is whether the agenda will be economic, social, or security and defense. If there is more deterioration on our northern borders, as you reported in the beginning of the show from Hezbollah, then I think Bibi Netanyahu will have the advantage. If the agenda will be more socio-economic, then the left parties, more the socialist parties, may have the advantage then.
Danny Ayalon, of course, you served capably the government of Israel as a diplomat. This morning, as a visiting professor at Yeshiva University, perhaps you're a bit more candid in your assessment of what's going on politically there at home. No matter the case, Danny, we are always pleased to have you. Thank you so much for joining us this morning from Newsmax, New York. I've got a few thoughts on what was going on. It's great to have you, Danny.
Yeah.
Got a few thoughts in the way I see it. Something Danny said is alarming. Something else going on that's kind of business as usual that people don't realize in politics here and abroad. We'll talk about that. When we come right back, Bo Bergdahl, will he be charged with desertion? We'll talk about it.